Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Beef Upfront podcast here on Pick Swap Media. Your host, Ryan Coyle, as always, back for week 2 edition of what we learned in college football. And on paper, going into the day, there wasn't many great games. You had the Texas-Michigan game at noon. That was really kind of the headliner, and it wasn't the most exciting matchup compared to week 1. I mean, the Tennessee NC State game, the Nebraska Colorado game, those games were all kind of highly anticipated as well. But it wasn't on paper the greatest slate, but it delivered. I mean, from Tulane, Kansas State at noon, Arkansas versus Oklahoma State. You have Notre Dame losing to Northern Illinois. Then you see what Tennessee does to NC State. You see the butt whooping that Nebraska puts on Colorado. Even like the Arizona State, Mississippi State game at night. Boise State, Oregon at night. Those games were all really fun football games. So sat in a couch chair at around 2:30, and I don't think I got up besides to get pizza, beer, or use the bathroom until about midnight. So great day of wall-to-wall football on Saturday, and we learned a lot. This is going to be a weekly thing here on Beef Up From, where we discuss and break down kind of the main points from the previous week's action every Monday or Tuesday. So we'll start at the top, where the first game of the day, the game that many people had all eyes on throughout the early slate, throughout the week, kind of leading up to it. And I feel like we were going to learn a lot about these two squads. And my take on this Texas-Michigan game going into it was Texas was going to dog walk them. Texas was going to go up into the big house and dominate that game from start to finish. And I really believe that because I didn't think Michigan had a good enough passing game to move the ball consistently on a high-level defense like Texas, and then to counter that, be able to put up points or be able to put up enough points to go throw for Quinn Ewers and what that offense can bring to the table. And so thing number one that we learned this week in college football, Michigan has a significant quarterback problem. I think it was kind of expected that they would take a step back this year for sure. Going undefeated, winning the national championship last year. Obviously, you're most likely going to take a step back from that. I was expecting 9-3 ish. That I think that was my projection. If this team doesn't figure out the passing game, it's more of an 8-4, 7-5 team. I really think that's how poor the passing game is. Davis Warren, the quarterback, he threw for 204 yards, but a lot of that was in garbage time. Simply turn on the tape, simply watch the game, and he's missing easy throws left and right. And just doesn't look like a competent passing attack as well. I mean, even with McCarthy leaving at quarterback going to the draft, they lost a bunch of guys at the receiver spots as well. So that is a passing game that Alex Orji, really, how bad are you if you're not trusted enough to go in there? And Michigan, I think, like I said, they'll be fine. They'll be able to go win, beat Minnesota, beat Illinois, whoever those kind of mid-tier Big Ten teams are on their schedule, because they are still talented. The defense is still really good, really strong, but the quarterback play in the passing game is nowhere near good enough to be, a legit Big Ten contender, let alone playoff team or college football national championship contender this year. As I said, it was expected that they take a step back, but I think it's going to be a pretty harsh reality this year for Michigan if they aren't able to figure out some stuff in the passing game. And it's kind of crazy that if they didn't have any faith in Orji coming into the year, for him not to be even turned to in the circumstances that we've seen out of Davis Warren, that goes to show you how kind of poor he is. So pretty wild that they didn't go out and address the portal, address the quarterback position in the portal. But here they are, and it's not like the NFL where you go out and make a trade. There's no trade deadline or anything. You got to do all your work in the offseason. So I think Michigan is headed for a real regression, and that's simply on the quarterback. A lot of the roster from last year is gone. The head coach is gone, but the quarterback is a serious step back, going from J.J. McCarthy to Davis Warren. And I think Michigan in their passing game for sure is in for a long season. To go to point number 2 on what we learned this week, though, staying in that same game, Texas deserves to be in the convo with Georgia and Ohio State. I feel like they're 1 and 2 pretty unanimously across the board for people's favorites to win the national title. Oregon was even in that conversation. We'll talk about them in a little bit, but Oregon was that kind of that third team, and then I think there was a drop-off. And I don't even think in my final projections I had Texas making the playoff. I had them going 10-2, but being like the first or second team out. They actually might have been my 10th team off the top of my head, but They deserve, I think, to be talked about in that conversation. And as I just said with Michigan, that's not as great of a win as probably going into the game, just because I think how incompetent Michigan wound up looking. And I think it says more about them than it did really Texas. But I do think I was underrating this Texas team a little bit. And it's still, at the end of the day, hard to go into the big house and beat them up as much as they did. They deserve to be in that Georgia-Ohio State national title contender conversation for sure. Sarkisian, he's gotten a lot better. I was a really negative on him as a coach, but he's gotten better and better since he's got to Texas. He goes into the big house and calls spade a spade. He puts on a clinic. Texas goes in there and dog walks them from start to finish. Quinn Ewers is balling. He's the Heisman favorite now at plus 600. Offensive line's legit. It's rare you see a Michigan defensive line get pushed around like Texas was able to do to them. And this team has guys that have played in big games before, played in big spots. It's an experienced team. They got that playoff taste last year, and now they're going for more. Maybe win the SEC, maybe go and win the college football playoff. But this is a legit squad down there in Austin, and I think they certainly belong in that Georgia-Ohio State conversation at the end of the day. Number 3 on what we learned this week, arguably could have been number 1 on the list, but Notre Dame, as Dennis Green once said, is what we thought they were. Everyone and their mother last week, and I said it too. I came on here on the show last week and said myself, Notre Dame guts, like being able to go into Texas State. I keep saying Texas Station, College Station, and finding a way to win that football game. It might have just said more about Texas A&M and that's going to be a really poor squad this year. But after last week, everyone was putting Notre Dame in that national title conversation. And I was on here too saying, looking at the schedule, I'd be surprised if they didn't go undefeated. And damn, be sure I was surprised to see Northern Illinois, 28-point underdog, go into South Bend and win that game. No one was expecting that. I did see a lot of people on kind of the Northern Illinois plus 28 on a lot of podcasts and a lot of articles I read throughout the week. A lot of people like them to at least kind of keep the game close just because Notre Dame's not really that big of an explosive team. Thought Northern Illinois could just keep it in the number, but being able to go to South Bend and win that game, I mean, that's not what national title teams do. And that's why I kind of said at the beginning, they are who we thought they were. They are a team that'll probably go 10-2, 11-1, and who knows at this rate if they make the playoff at that, but they're not a national title team. They paid a quarterback big money in Riley Leonard, and he can't even throw the ball. I think under 200 yards passing in each of the games. The receivers aren't that great, the passing game. They're going to be able to run the ball. They're going to be able to play well up front, probably on offensive and defensive lines. The defense is really strong, but there's still a lot of question marks about the team, and that was my take on them and why I was so surprised that they did go to Texas A&M. This is a team that had a lot of reshuffling to do. I mean, new OC, new quarterback, only 2 starters return on offense. I thought it was going to take some time for sure, and got off to a hot start there, winning at Texas A&M, but we saw this week, you don't lose to Northern Illinois at home if you're a national title contending team. Georgia wouldn't do that. Alabama wouldn't do that. Texas wouldn't do that. So the Notre Dame, at the end of the day, point number 3, they still are who we thought they were. Maybe they get in. They're probably praying for NIU to run the table themselves, go 11-1 or something, be one of those potential G5 playoff teams, win the MAC, and that could probably get Notre Dame in if they go 11-1. But USC's looking really good. Got that game still on the schedule. Who knows? Florida State, they have the talent, but are they able to figure it out? That game's still on the schedule. Louisville's on the schedule. Like Notre Dame, at what we thought last week, cakewalk, undefeated season pretty much. At worst, 11-1 with a loss to a USC team maybe. Now there's a lot of questions to be asked, and that's a real confidence-killing game as well. 28-point favorite at home to Northern Illinois. You just simply can't drop that, and they did. So Notre Dame, welcome back to the tier below the national title contenders. Number 4, probably the one I'm most passionate on as well. The Colorado Buffaloes, the entire program, that entire football team, that was an embarrassing performance that they put on the national stage at Nebraska in Lincoln. But that Colorado program, top to bottom, is a mess. Offensive line, atrocious. Can't run the ball. Atrocious running game. Can't defend. Atrocious. I think they're soft. I think the leadership's a joke. That press conference after the game where Shador said, well, how many times did Dylan Raiola get touched? Basically saying, my offensive line sucks. I can't do anything. Like, you're the quarterback. You're the face, really, of the program, you next to your dad. and that's the way that you go and talk about your teammates in the post game. I mean, that can't be happening. And for you to do that as well, and you're in the talks to maybe be the number one overall pick in the draft, I mean, that's embarrassing. I think they're front runners when things are going great. They're out there on social media. They're talking all the shit in the world. They go into Lincoln, walk into Lincoln, and they get punched in the mouth and they cowered away right away. I don't know why people were so high on this team coming into the offseason or coming out of the offseason. Travis Hunter, Shedeur Sanders, they're great. And I said this on the show last week. But you look at the top 22 players in that game on both sides of the ball, you got number 1 and 2 on Colorado and Shedeur and Travis. I bet you 3 through 10, everyone was probably a Nebraska Cornhusker. I mean, that's plain and simple. That's what it is. I mean, Colorado ran the ball for 16 yards on 22 carries. And I know quarterback sacks, they get the rushing yards taken away. So Shedeur finished with like negative 30 rushing yards or something. But 22 carries for 16 yards, that's less than 1 yard per attempt, 0.7 yards an attempt. I mean, that is atrocious. And for them to come in there, we're ready, we have this. Yeah, it's one thing to walk in there and be confident and cocky and all that. But it's another thing to go out there and just be completely outplayed, completely outclassed on the field. I mean, it wasn't ever a game. That pick six, you could have ended the game right there. The one that Shedeur threw to Tommy Hill in the end zone. I mean, you end the game plain and simple right there. There was no coming back from that. I mean, if you had any sense in the world, you would have put your entire bank account on Nebraska live money line at that point. It might not have been worth it because of how over the game was in the odds, but that game was over right then and there. And I think Colorado State this week +7, +7.5 at home is a great play against this Colorado team. People still are going to be putting money on them, but I think it's going to get ugly before it gets better out there in Boulder this year. And I think the wheels could fall off, and the wheels could fall off really fast. Point number 5 of what we learned this week in college football. Boise State running back, Ashton Jeanty, simply, I have it put down, is the man. 45 carries, 459 yards, 9 touchdowns, 10.2 yards per carry in 8 quarters of football this year against Georgia Southern and Oregon. Was 100-1 last week when Joe and I were recording to win the Heisman. Was looking during the game against Oregon, 80-1. He's now down to 50-1. So a lot of Heisman power rankings come out. He's right up there in the top 2, top 3. I mean, he just ran for 192 yards and 3 touchdowns at Oregon. I mean, Boise State's on the TV. Go find them. This kid's a fun watch. I can't help but kind of compare him to Jay Ajayi, former Boise State running back, but might be even better than that. And playing in the Mountain West, sure, is this a sustainable pace? 9 touchdowns in 8 quarters? Probably not. I mean, definitely not. But playing in the Mountain West, it's not like he's playing in the SEC or the Big Ten. He's going to have a chance to put up some really special numbers this year. So Ashton Jeanty at 50-1 still to win the Heisman, it might be worth a toss. A $5 bet, you pay out really well on that one. So Ashton Jeanty is the man. Thing number 5 we learned this week in college football. Stay in that same game when we go to number 6. Oregon, overhyped, only beat Boise by 3 as an 18.5-point favorite at home. Only beat Idaho, an FCS team, by 10 as a 49-point favorite at home as well. They have Oregon State, UCLA, and Michigan State up next. I would expect them to be double-digit favorites in all of those games. They are a double-digit favorite against Oregon State, but then they have Ohio State come to town. And Ohio State, they're not playing with their food. They took care of it. It's not saying much, but Akron and Western Michigan still. The Boise is a good team, a solid team, but they shouldn't be able to keep that game within a field goal at home and need some late game heroics for Oregon to come back kind of there in the fourth quarter. So Oregon, as I said at the beginning, it was kind of, Georgia and Ohio State really neck and neck for national title favorites. Oregon was that third team, maybe just a little bit of a tier below. And then it was kind of Texas, Ole Miss was thrown in there, schools like that we've seen that have started out well as well. But Oregon, they're falling down. Like these 2 performances, I think, are certainly concerning. Got a rivalry game this week in Oregon State. Let's see if you could turn it on them. But Buckeyes are coming to town in a few weeks, and a lot of people had that as the one Buckeyes loss, and Oregon potentially running the table with a lot of these hard games on their schedule at home this year. it's starting to look like a flip for me, at least, to put in Ohio State. I think Oregon might be overhyped, and they got a lot to figure out. And as I said, a pretty light schedule coming up. Oregon State, UCLA, Michigan State should be double-digit favorites in all those games before Ohio State comes to town. But definitely hover the hand over the panic button a little bit, I think, if you're an Oregon fan. Number 7, we go down south to Gainesville. DJ Lagway has to be the quarterback going forward for Florida. It was announced today after Graham Mertz missed last week with a concussion. Lagway starts. Billy Napier comes out and says those two guys are both going to be playing going forward. And I just don't know how you can do that. DJ Lagway, the number 3 recruit in the class, the entire class this past year, number 1 quarterback. If Billy Napier has a future at Florida, it's with DJ Lagway running the show for him. I mean, plain and simple, he brought him in to be the quarterback of the future for Florida. And after that Miami game, the fan base wanted him gone. Now he gets a perfect opportunity to kind of put some points up on the board, appease the fans a little bit with Samford coming to town, and DJ Lagway goes out there and puts on a show. But Graham Mertz last week, 11 for 21 for 91 yards. What are you getting out of him? I mean, he's a solid quarterback, but at the end of the day, he's a solid quarterback if you want to potentially make a bowl game. Like, DJ Lagway at least ups your ceiling, and at worst comes to worst, he gives the administration, even if you do go 5-7, 6-6, DJ Lagway has a couple big games. Maybe they pull off an upset or two. Billy Napier can be like, that's my guy. That's my quarterback. I played him this year thinking I would get him next year as well, be able to keep him. DJ Lagway, if he's able to play at Florida this year, I'm sure as long as Napier stays, he would stay next year. But if you fire Billy Napier and DJ Lagway, he probably is hitting the portal at the end of the day. That's the coach who brought him in. That's who he went to go play for. Plain and simple, DJ Lagway has to be the quarterback going forward the rest of the year at Florida. You get nothing with Graham Mertz at the end of the day. DJ Lagway, 18 of 25, 456 yards, 3 touchdowns against Samford. And I know it's Samford, but still, watch the highlights of that game. Watch some of the throws he makes. He's sweet. He can run. He can throw. Just throw him in the wolves. At the end of the day, if you're Billy Napier, you got to go down swinging with the guy that you brought in to be the quarterback of the future for you. And to be quite frankly, Billy Napier, you don't have a future at Florida if you don't win this year. And DJ Lagway gives you the best case to do that. And the worst case, he shows a lot of flashes, and the administration's like, all right, we can build off this. We have one more year, one more chance, Billy, and you have DJ kind of running the show for you. He's got the star power to help make up for some of the deficiencies on this team and give them a chance to win some of these games. So he's got to be the guy going forward, and I don't want to see Mertz out there and being a 1-2 kind of rotating cast there at the quarterback spot. Number 8, we head to the Big 12. Kansas and Jalen Daniels, they're missing former offensive coordinator Andy Kotelnicki, the new offensive coordinator at Penn State. Jalen Daniels, a super dynamic and fun player these past few years when he's been able to stay healthy, but he struggled out of the gate without Kotelnicki calling the show on offense. Through 2 games, and the first one was against Lindenwood, and I know he only played, I believe it was like the first half, but through 2 games, he's only got 289 total passing yards, 3 passing touchdowns, 4 interceptions. And he only has 35 rushing yards as well. And this is a guy that's a gifted runner, a really fast, quick quarterback out there on the edge, no rushing touchdowns. They only put up 17 points against Illinois. They lost that game as a touchdown favorite about. It was 5.5, 6 points. It's not looking too hot right now in Kansas. Illinois, as we know, under Brett Bielema, going to be a strong defense, could muck up the game. But even against Lindenwood, like, they put up 49 points. It was like 49-0, I believe the final score was. But Daniels still didn't put up any intriguing stats there, and you got to wonder how much he's missing his former play caller. So Kansas was a team that some people thought could make some noise, vie for a trip to the Big 12 title game, be in that kind of chaos region of 8-4 to like 10-2 teams that we're expecting out of the Big 12, but it doesn't look like that's going to be happening anytime soon. That's one of the under kind of talked about things this year for Daniels, who's a guy when he's been healthy, he's been one of the more dynamic quarterbacks in college football. Number 9, we go to Knoxville, Tennessee. The Tennessee Volunteers are a playoff threat for sure, as well as an SEC title threat. That might not be super breaking news, big news, but I, for one, thought it was more of an 8-4, 9-3 team coming into the year. I could certainly see a path where this is a 10-2, 11-1 team. That was an ass kicking they put on NC State. I'm not a huge NC State fan, but I thought at the end of the year, that's an 8-4 team probably, especially playing in the ACC. But they went and they dominated that game in Charlotte. A pretty pro-heavy NC State crowd from start to finish. Nico's looking like the truth. Dylan Sampson's a legit running back, and the defense is legit as well. That defensive line is one of, if not the best defensive line in the entire country. Up front, on both sides of the ball, it's a really strong team. Held NC State to 10 points, who NC State will probably have their way with some teams in the ACC this year and be able to put up some points themselves. But I do think you have to look at the schedule going forward. I think 10-2 at worst, and that's if they drop the home game to Bama and the away game at Georgia. Those are the real two tough ones on the schedule that stick out. They got to go to Oklahoma next week. They play Kent State this week. That should be a blowout. Probably take the starters out by half to get ready for that Oklahoma game. If they win that, I see no more than 2 losses on that entire schedule. And you get Alabama at home. That place is going to be rocking for that one. And you go to Georgia. And who knows, if Nico's the guy we think he is and the defense is as good as we think they might have a chance to go in there into Athens and win that game as well. So a lot of ball left to be played, but I think Tennessee is kind of staking their claim as one of the best teams in the nation and a threat to win the SEC this year. And number 10, not the most kind of exciting one. I was, as I said, it wasn't the greatest overall slate of games. There was a lot of fun games and good action, but kind of big picture stuff. We didn't really get that many answers this weekend, I think. But I think you look at SMU transitioning into the ACC this year, one of the more overrated teams from the offseason. I got a win total future on them of over 9. I thought this was a 10-win team. Mine might have been 8.5, so 9 wins could still get it done. But they haven't looked encouraging at all, transitioning from the AAC to the ACC. I had this coming into the year as a 10-win team. The QB situation has been a head-scratcher. Stone, Jennings, who's really the guy? It's looking like Jennings, but Stone was the guy last year, and he was throwing it all around the yard, and that team was putting up 38.7 points per game, I think it was. It was outright at home to BYU, who's supposed to be one of the bottom teams in the Big 12, and they only put up 15 points. The ACC is looking down. There certainly was an opportunity for SMU to emerge as a team to go 10-2, 11-1 themselves and maybe sneak in the back door of the playoffs. And season's still young, but, I mean, they blew out Houston Christian, needed late game heroic comeback to beat Nevada, and now you drop a home game to a BYU team that's supposed to finish at the bottom of their conference. Real head-scratching start for an SMU team that people were high on. Schedule was really soft. That was another reason why I kind of liked them, but I thought it was going to be a fun team and one of the surprise teams for sure this season, and they're looking like a surprise, not in the positive light, but in the negative light. But I'll do it for the 10 things that we learned in college football this week. As always, everyone, thank you for tuning in. We will be back on Wednesday night to do the college football preview for upcoming week 3. But as always, everyone, thank you for tuning in. Please like, subscribe, and we will talk soon.